Most people think that gratitude is about being thankful after things work out the way you want them to, whether that's having a better relationship, better health, a better place to live, you found the love of your life, whatever that may be. And that sounds all well and good, but that's not actually how to get what you really want. And it's also why gratitude can feel so freaking impossible when life is actually hard. Because no one teaches us how to use gratitude when everything feels like it's actually falling apart. And some of the most powerful gratitude that I've ever personally experienced in my life didn't come from things going right. It actually came from experiences that I never would have chosen. When it felt like everything was falling apart, because I'm not talking about pretending something's not painful when you're going through something. I'm not talking about forcing positivity, and I'm definitely not talking about spiritual bypassing or just slapping everything happens for a reason label on top of real suffering when you're going through it. And I also want to be really honest about something. I do actually believe, deeply believe, that every single experience we have in our lives is happening for us, not to us. And this is not in a way that minimizes how hard it is when you're actually stuck in the mud, right? Not in a way that excuses pain or injustice, but in a way that asks a very different question. Like, who am I becoming through this situation, through this experience? And what is this experience asking me to see that I couldn't see before? Those are questions that changed everything for me. Welcome to Rewired and Unstoppable. I'm Tammy Anderson, and this is where belief rewiring meets nervous system regulation, so you can create the health, success, happiness, and joy you want in every area of your life. Let's get into it. I'm talking about gratitude as a state of being, living in it, like a way of orienting yourself to life, especially when you're walking through something that you didn't choose and that you can't control. Because let's face it, when life knocks the wind out of you, you really only have two options. You can either collapse into anger and blame and resentment and despair and fear, or you can choose, sometimes it might be moment by moment, where you are going to place your attention. Is it on everything that's wrong, or is it going to be on the blessings that you already have? And that's a choice that changes everything. It's all about perspective. And believe me, I did not always get this, and I didn't always practice this. In fact, some of the experiences that taught me this, that taught me the power of gratitude, were the hardest things I've ever lived through. Things that I would never have chosen for myself, obviously. Things I wouldn't wish on anyone. But looking back now, I can see how learning to find gratitude inside those moments is what shaped me into who I am today. It's what kept my heart open when it really would have been easy to shut down. It's what kept my nervous system grounded and from completely collapsing under the weight of everything that I was carrying at the time. And it's what taught me how to see life and other people through a very, very different lens. And I want to be really, really clear about something before we go any further. Choosing gratitude when you're going through something hard doesn't mean that you're grateful that something terrible happened or is happening. It means that you're grateful for everything that still exists in the midst of all the chaos, for what still remains, for what's intact, for what you still can hold on to, for the tiny little blessings that we oftentimes overlook. And sometimes that's your health, sometimes it's a relationship, sometimes it's the air coming in and out of your lungs, or the fact that you woke up this morning. For me, it's often the little snorting noises that my dog makes, just the little things. And sometimes gratitude is the only thing that keeps you tethered to life when everything else feels like it's slipping away and falling apart. So today I want to talk to you about gratitude, not as platitude, but as a portal. a portal to perspective, to safety, to resilience, and eventually to abundance in ways that most people don't even expect. So I had no idea when I first started, very cautiously kind of tiptoeing into living from a place of gratitude, how much it would expand my life. And I want to share with you kind of how I evolved into living from a state of gratitude with a few stories from my own life. Not because I want to share my drama, but because they're real life, right? And the fact about real life that most people forget is that we were never promised that every moment in life is going to be easy, right? The truth is that the hard stuff is what gives us the biggest opportunities for growth. And that's if we're willing to grow with them, instead of letting those experiences crush us. So if you are walking through something that's really hard right now, if life feels really freaking heavy, uncertain, unfair, I want you to just stay with me on this. Just hear me out. Because sometimes a shift in perspective is the first thing that creates enough safety in your body and your nervous system for everything else to kind of fall into place and follow behind. The first place that I really internalized the idea of living from a space of gratitude, and what I mean learning to live from a space of gratitude, not just intellectually, but like really in my bones, was during the years that I spent struggling with chronic illness. So I was chronically ill for over 2 decades. And during that time, it felt like my body was just a battleground, something that I had to fight through every single day. Every single moment of my life revolved around managing symptoms. And it felt like I was being held hostage by the chaos happening in my body. I woke up every single morning wondering how I was going to make it through the day. And I went to bed every night terrified and creating doom and gloom stories in my mind about what the future might look like for my kids if things didn't change for me. So at that point, gratitude felt ridiculous. And somebody would say, just be grateful. I wanted to smack them in the face. Honestly, it was really offensive. Sometimes when I was really struggling and I was at a low point, my husband would get really impatient and he would shout at me like, just be grateful. And I would think to myself, for what? What do you want me to be grateful for? For this? For this misery that I'm living in every single day? But something interesting happened when I finally hit a place where I was just so exhausted physically, emotionally, spiritually, just completely bankrupt in all of those areas, that I realized that the way I'd been living wasn't sustainable anymore. I couldn't stay in fight or flight forever, and I couldn't continue living in this state of fear and sadness and despair and anger, and I couldn't keep letting my mind rehearse everything that was wrong in the world, right, and in my life. And I couldn't keep using my thought energy to rehearse a future for myself that I didn't really want. And it was around that time that I hit my rock bottom. But looking back, I must have still been hanging on by a thread of hope because I read about gratitude in a book. And then I saw someone talking about it on Oprah. And I remember thinking, this is so woo-woo. Like, this is so not me. But also at the same time, I was kind of at my rock bottom. So I was like, well, what the heck do I have to lose, right? So I started a gratitude journal, and it felt really fake. I was really actually embarrassed that I was writing in this gratitude journal. It felt so weird, like super embarrassed. And I hid my journal under a stack of books on my nightstand because I didn't want my husband to find it. I didn't want him to know that I was doing something so weird, because it felt really artificial for me. I wasn't living from a place of gratitude. I didn't feel like I had anything to be grateful for because I was suffering so much. So at first, I was writing things down and I wasn't really feeling it. My entries were really kind of superficial. But at the same time, I was finding gratitude in things that I had just kind of taken for granted before. Like, I'm grateful for my blankets. I'm grateful for my dog. I'm grateful that the sun came out today, right? Nothing really profound, but that's the thing. Gratitude doesn't have to be profound when you're really living from it. But as I continued this practice night after night, something started to shift. And I found myself noticing more automatically things that I really had to be grateful for already in my life, even though I was suffering. I really started recognizing the very many blessings that were already in my life, even though my life was far from perfect, even though I was still living with the same symptoms. Because for the first time in as long as I could remember, my attention finally wasn't only on what was wrong. It was also on what was still here, what was actually working in my life, what hadn't been stolen from me. And over time, slowly, gratitude started becoming a way that I just oriented myself to life. I started really feeling it, not just saying it, but really feeling it. Like feeling my heart expand when a friend would check in on me, feeling really delighted and truly grateful on the days that my symptoms were better, and not bracing in fear that they would be worse again tomorrow, like I had before. So my gratitude practice didn't magically make me healthy overnight, but it did something just as important. What happened was my nervous system was finally starting to find pockets of safety. Moments when I could feel the tension in my muscles just start to release. And that's what eventually allowed healing to happen, because healing can't happen when the nervous system is on a state of alert all the time. So looking back now, I can say something that would have sounded completely impossible and irrational and illogical back then. I am really deeply grateful for that chapter in my life. And it's not because it was easy, not because I would ever want to relive it, but because it taught me how to see life through a very different lens, how to slow down, how to appreciate things I might have taken for granted otherwise. It taught me how to live from gratitude before things worked out the way I wanted them to. And that has improved virtually every aspect of my life, not only my health. And years later, when life handed me some other experiences that otherwise might have broken me, I had a very different foundation to stand on. And I see this same shift happen with my clients all the time. I work with really sick people. A while back, I was on a call with a client who was dealing with chronic Lyme and mold illness, and she was exhausted, totally overwhelmed, angry, bitter, as people often are when they're struggling with chronic health stuff. And on the call, she told me that she was seriously considering leaving her marriage because she didn't feel like her husband was supporting her enough. And I totally get it. I've felt her pain because I've been there. So when your nervous system is fried, you're in pain every day, you're exhausted, it can really feel like no one is showing up for you the way you need them to be. So because I had been there myself, I didn't invalidate her feelings, but I did help gently shift her perspective in the other direction. So I said to her, "Weren't you telling me last time we talked how much he's been doing to help you?" And she paused for just a second. And I reminded her that she had told me that he had taken on a massive mold remediation project in their home, that he was overseeing himself, that he was laundering all of her clothes constantly to help reduce, her mold exposure. He was carrying a lot of the load and doing most of the parenting while she was barely hanging on by a thread, right? Barely surviving. So I said something to her like, I wonder how hard this has been on him too. Because I remember that when I was sick, I was so consumed by my own suffering that I couldn't see what it might have been like from the other perspective to be married to somebody who was sick and exhausted and angry all the time. So that conversation really shifted things for her. And she told me later that it was the best thing I could have said to her. It shifted her away from rage to perspective, from that place of resentment to appreciation. And from feeling alone to realizing that she actually wasn't as unsupported as she was feeling. She was just really overwhelmed. And that shift in perspective can make all the difference. Because gratitude doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you see everything, how you perceive everything, the meaning that you place on things. And when you see these changes, everything else has room to change too. And this is why I'm so passionate about this topic, because learning to live from a place of gratitude when my health was falling apart didn't just help me heal my body. It prepared me for what came next. Hey, quick pause from the show. If this episode is landing for you, if you're starting to notice how often your mind defaults to what's wrong, what's missing, what's broken, what's not working, what should be happening, that matters more than you probably realize. So we talk a lot about detoxing these days. Parasites, mold, heavy metals, candida, sugar, alcohol. And yes, I live in the functional medicine world. I run detoxes with my clients all the time. But there is one detox that impacts virtually every area of your life, your health, your relationships, your finances, your connection, your sense of safety in the world. And it's the one that most people never even consider. And it's often why all the other stuff doesn't stick long term. It's the detox of complaining, because that constant mental output keeps your nervous system stuck in stress. And when that happens, nothing truly changes long term. That's why I created the 2-week complaining detox challenge to help you take this awareness and actually put it into practice in real time. So if you want to join us, you'll find it linked in the description below. All right, let's get back to the episode. Because life didn't suddenly just get easy. Remember, we're not promised that. But I had built a muscle. And I'd also built a completely different perspective on how I viewed and responded to every experience in my life moving forward. And that really mattered when my life handed me moments that could have completely taken me to my knees. So that brings me to the next big event in my life, which is my son's accident. This is one of those moments in my life where I can say without hesitation that gratitude was not just helpful. It wasn't just woo-woo, pretend everything is perfect when it wasn't. It was the only thing that kept me grounded. So when I got the call about the accident, my world just kind of stopped. I felt like I was in some sort of alternate reality. My son and 3 of his friends had been in a really horrific car accident with a tractor trailer. One that only by the grace of God, all 4 of them survived, when not a single one of them really probably should have. It was one of those calls that no parent ever wants to receive or is prepared to receive. And here's what's really interesting. When you learn to move through life from a place of gratitude. The day that the accident happened, and then in the days and weeks that followed as my son and his friends were recovering, I had no space in my body or my heart for anger or for blame. For anyone. Not toward the truck driver that made the left turn in front of them. Not towards the circumstance, not towards the energy of how could this have happened? It's not fair. Because anger and blame are really heavy energies. They don't solve problems. They don't help anyone heal. What I did have space for was gratitude. And let me be very clear about this. Let me differentiate here. I was not grateful that the accident had happened. I was not grateful that my son's back was broken or that he had a head injury. I was not grateful that his life and the lives of 3 of his friends were put at that big of a risk. But what I was profoundly grateful for was what still remained. I was grateful that they were all alive. I was grateful that they would all walk again. I was grateful that they could all still talk and weren't drooling out the sides of their mouths. I was grateful that they would all go on to live normal lives. I was grateful that I still got to see my son smile and hear his voice every day, sit next to him and hold his hand. I was grateful for the simple, tangible things I could do. Grateful to hold his elbow and walk him into the bathroom when he needed to go. I was grateful for the essential oils that I rubbed into his feet and along his spine to help him heal. For the magnet pad that I tucked into his back brace to support healing. The fact that he didn't suffer permanent brain damage or memory loss. So here's the thing. I couldn't change the fact that the accident happened. That was the reality. So no amount of rage, fear, or replaying what ifs and all that stuff was going to undo that, right? I couldn't change it, but I could choose where I placed my attention. And I chose over and over and over again to focus on what I still had instead of what I almost lost. And that choice made a huge difference in how I perceived and managed the entire situation. Because gratitude in moments like that isn't about pretending that everything's okay. It's about anchoring yourself to what's still true, what's still intact, what's still life-giving. And that anchor kept me steady during one of the most challenging experiences of my life and my family's life. It kept me present. It kept me out of despair. And it allowed me to show up for my son, not as a panicked, spiraling mom, but as a grounded, regulated, safe presence for him, because that's what he needed. So looking back now, I can see how much that mattered, not just for me, but for him. Because what he needed most, both immediately after the accident and in the days and weeks that followed during his recovery, was for me to be clear-headed and calm and safe and bring him feelings of security at a time when things were really scary for him and hard. My son's accident was just the first layer of the cake. And here's the part that most people don't realize. Just 4 months later, after my son's accident, my husband died by suicide. 4 months. I hadn't even had time to exhale from one crisis before the next one arrived. My nervous system didn't get a break. I had no time to catch my breath. And what made this even more complex is that in the few years leading up to his death, my husband had been really struggling with chronic pain that led to depression. So when my son was recovering from his broken back and the traumatic accident and a head injury, I really needed to be the grounded one. Because my husband, as much as he just loved our kids, was so caught up in his own pain, he couldn't hold that grounded, safe energy that my son needed. So when he died, I wasn't just grieving a partner. I was trying to hold everything together. I was trying to get my son through his senior year in high school after a really tragic accident and the loss of his dad, and so many other big life changes that I don't even have time to go into in this episode. And I was holding the weight of knowing that everyone, my kids, my husband's parents, his sister, everyone needed me to stay upright, hold it together emotionally, energetically, mentally, even when my own world had just collapsed underneath me. And again, Gratitude wasn't something that just came easily. I was not grateful that my husband was gone. I was not grateful for the way he died. And I was not grateful for the trauma that it caused our family. So know that. But I leaned into gratitude anyway. I had made gratitude a practice for years at that point. It was a muscle that I had built. And I am so incredibly thankful to myself for that, because it was the only thing that kept me getting out of bed each morning. I was grateful that my kids were still here. I was grateful that we had each other. I was grateful for all the friends I had who showed up. My CrossFit family was amazing. Meals being dropped off, trash collected, texts that said, I don't really know what to say to you right now, but I just want to let you know I'm here. I was grateful for the moments, even the tiny ones, where I could feel my feet on the ground and the breath in my body. And during that first year, I committed to something that felt absurd to a lot of people. People were like, I can't believe you're doing this. I posted something I was grateful for every single day during the next year on Facebook, and I called it 365 Days of Gratitude. Not because everything was okay, not because I was totally healed and not struggling, but because gratitude kept me grounded and gave me perspective. It helped me to see what was still here. It helped my nervous system find safety. It gave my mind something to focus on instead of just spiraling into despair. And it gave my kids a version of me that modeled strength without shutdown, grief without collapse, and love without bitterness. And I know I didn't do everything right during that time. Nothing can prepare you for something like that. So gratitude didn't erase my grief. It didn't stop my pain. And there were days when I couldn't stop the tears. Days when the tears just came out of nowhere when I was least expecting them to come. But gratitude did keep my heart open. It kept me grounded. It kept me looking for blessings that were still all around me. And sometimes that's the only thing standing between survival and collapse. And this is the part that I want to gently offer to you, especially if you're struggling with something in your own life right now, and the idea of being grateful feels kind of absurd and maybe a little insulting like it did to me. Gratitude did not make the hard things I was dealing with go away. It didn't protect me from loss. It didn't prevent my son's accident from happening. It didn't spare me from experiencing pain and hardship. But what it did, though, is it helped me choose the way I responded to each of those experiences. And the way I responded determined the state of my nervous system. It helped me stay present instead of dissociating, collapsing, hardening, or just pulling the blankets over my head and refusing to get out of bed when it felt like everything was unraveling and my foundation was being yanked out from under me. And that's what most people miss about gratitude. It's not about pretending things are okay. It's not about slapping a positive spin on something that hurts. It's not. And it's definitely not about minimizing your lived experience. Gratitude is about where you place your attention when you can't control what's happening. It helps you shift perspective. Because whatever you consistently focus on, your body responds to that. Your nervous system responds to the meaning that you give to every experience in your life and the interactions that you're having, and it is responding all day long to your thoughts. To whether you're scanning for threat or anchoring into what's still safe, what's still real, what's still here. So when you live in resentment and anger and blame and despair and shame, your nervous system stays braced for danger. But when you deliberately place your attention on what's still here, what remains, what's still intact, what you still get to love, your nervous system can feel safe and relax. It can exhale. And that's not because your life is suddenly perfect, but because you're no longer fighting reality on top of just surviving it, right? And that means you're moving towards a future that you actually want instead of one that you don't want. And that's where resilience lives. That's where clarity returns. That's where you get the capacity to keep going without hardening your heart in the process. This is why I don't see gratitude as just a mindset trick. It is a regulating force, a way to stay connected to life, even when life is breaking your freaking heart. And if you're in a season right now where things feel really heavy, hard, where you're just tired of holding it all together, where you don't know how to feel safe inside your own body, sometimes gratitude starts as something as small as just noticing and being grateful for the fact that you still have air in your lungs. You're still here. Gosh, my dog's snoring is really cute. I had a bed to sleep on last night. And that's enough. Because even with a small shift in what you focus on, you can change how your body feels. And when your body feels a little safer, you can think more clearly. And when you can think more clearly, the next step becomes obvious. And this is the part that most people miss. They think that gratitude is something that you practice after things improve, after the diagnosis changes, after the relationship gets better, after your bank account looks healthier, right? But that's backwards. Gratitude isn't something that you wait for. It's something that you choose right now, even though things aren't perfect. It's one of the ways safety is created. And when I say safety, I don't mean comfort. I mean perspective. Gratitude changes what you notice. And when you live in a state of gratitude, you start seeing things that you would have completely missed before. Not because they weren't there, right? Not because life is suddenly perfect, but because you're no longer filtering everything through a place of fear, resentment, and scarcity. You see people differently. You hear things differently. You interpret situations completely differently. The same circumstance that once felt like an attack can just start feeling like information, or maybe an invitation, or maybe even a lesson. So many people think that gratitude means just ignoring what's wrong, letting people off the hook, settling. It doesn't mean that at all. Gratitude doesn't say, this is okay if it's not. Gratitude says, this is what is, and I'm choosing not to let it harden me. And when you live that way, when gratitude becomes your default state instead of a reaction, it quietly changes how you show up in your relationships with other people and with yourself. It changes how you speak to yourself, how you move through challenges in life. We all have them from time to time. And how you experience life as a whole. And this is why I think of gratitude as a state of being, a way of being in the world, of moving through your life. When you live from gratitude, you are not denying pain. You're not pretending things didn't happen. And honestly, I think that's why people get pissed off when somebody tells them to be grateful when things are hard, because they feel like their experience is being invalidated. But that's not what it's about at all. You're simply saying, I'm choosing not to let this experience shut me down, to close my heart, to break me. And that's a choice that can transform your life in ways you probably can't even imagine right now. Because when you live in gratitude as a state of being, you show up differently, you listen differently, you respond instead of react, you stop preparing for the worst. And over time, that will change everything in your life. It changes the quality of your relationships, the way your body feels, the way you experience challenges, just the way you move through the world. And I want to be really clear about something here. Gratitude did not make my life easy. It didn't erase my grief. It didn't remove the hard seasons. It didn't prevent loss or pain. But it gave me something to stand on when everything else felt unstable. It kept me open when it would have been a whole lot easier to just shut down. And it gave me access to parts of myself I didn't know I had, like resilience and compassion and strength. And looking back now, I can say this honestly. I would not be who I am today without the experiences that I've been through. I wouldn't have the depth, the perspective, the capacity to sit with others in their pain and empathize with them and guide them. And I wouldn't have this work. Gratitude didn't make me passive. It didn't make me settle for less. It's given me a whole lot more. It made me available to healing, to connection, to meaning, and eventually to joy. The biggest joy I've ever experienced in my life. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't know how I could possibly feel grateful right now, you don't have to start big. It's not about forcing yourself to feel thankful for the thing that's hurting you. Sometimes it's as simple as noticing that you're still here and can breathe. Because even the tiniest moments of gratitude can help to start to shift your perspective. And when your perspective shifts, how you experience your life shifts right along with it. When you practice gratitude consistently as a way of being, you start to notice the changes. You notice changes in how you respond, in what you focus on, and how safe you feel in your body and in rooms of other people. And over time, what's going to happen kind of without you even realizing it, you look back and think, I'm not even the same person that I used to be, you know? And it's not because your life just suddenly became perfect, but because you changed how you meet it. So I hope you found a nugget of something in this episode today that resonated and helped shift your perspective. I'm genuinely so grateful that you chose to spend this time with me today, learning and reflecting and growing. And if anything about this conversation resonated with you and you want to go deeper, I've linked some resources down below that can help you dig in and start applying this work in a real, tangible way. So if you're listening on one of the audio platforms, subscribing and sharing this episode really helps this message reach the people who need it the most. And quite frankly, I think that's most people in the world today. And if you're watching on YouTube, please leave me a comment. Tell me what resonated for you. I love reading all of them. And when you take the time to leave a comment, it just means so much to me. I love you. I mean that. I really do. And I'll see you in the next episode.